talk about Ray Dalio. All right. Some of y'all may not know who Ray Dalio is. Ray Dalio is a very, very, very famed investor that had something to say. And so they asked him, they're basically asking everybody that understand how money works in an economy and have a vested interest in seeing what happens within the economy through their investments. But they asked Ray Dalio what he thought about tariffs and the position that the United States of America is in. This was CNBC. I have not watched it yet, so I wanted to watch it with you guys. This is what he had to say.
Bridgewater Associates.
And I've listen. If you have not gotten a Ray Dalio book, it's a great read. Anything you can find with Ray Dalio on it, and I may not necessarily agree with everything that he says, but anything that you can find with Ray Dalio on it, make sure you get that. It is a phenomenal read.
Founder Ray Dalio posting on LinkedIn and weighing in on tariffs. He says it's more important to focus on the idea that, quote, we're seeing a classic breakdown of the major monetary, political, and geopolitical orders. This sort of breakdown occurs only about once in a lifetime, but they have happened many times in history when similar unsustainable conditions were in place. Joining us right now, first on CNBC, is Bridgewater founder Ray Dalio, and we're thrilled to have you here on a morning when we're still trying to make sense of what all these tariffs mean, Ray, and frankly, how all of this plays out. So to the extent that you can help us with the history, or at least a history lesson, if you think there are parallels, how does this play out?
Good to see you, Joe. Andrew, Joe, and Becky. I think that we don't understand how the cycle goes because it comes along about once in a lifetime. But there are orders, there are systems, and the systems break down for certain reasons, and it creates cycles. For example, there's a monetary system, and then there's a debt cycle. And so as a result, we now have, one man's debts, another man's assets. And when you build these up and you get to a point where you can't sustain that, you have a debt issue. We have a debt issue. We can get into that, but there's a monetary cycle. There's a internal political order cycle that takes us from one political order to another political order, in which there's then classically great turbulence between the left and the right. And because of disorder, particularly in democracies, there's a lot of fighting because there needs to be cooperation, compromise, and so on. And we're in the process of changing that order. In addition, we have the international world order. International world order began in 1945. There's a war. You win a war. The dominant powers get to set the rules. That was a series of multilateralism, things like the United Nations World Trade Organization, world this and world that. And that multilateralism is then breaking down for unilateralism for the same reasons. So there are these three orders related to too much debt. Debt is money. Second, internal order. How does our system work? Who's going to get control of this problem? And then number three, in addition of the five main forces, there's also throughout history, climate, acts of nature. Droughts, floods, and pandemics have killed more people and toppled more orders. And then there's also throughout history, man's inventiveness and new technologies, which is creating this transformative result.
Right.
The interactions of these is what's going on. So if we look at tariffs represent a dealing with the imbalances. The imbalance means we have a tremendous capital imbalance and a tremendous trade imbalance, which is unsustainable. And so that's the backdrop of this. Related to that is also the international conflict. How do you have dependency, mutual dependency? How can the United States be a safe country and not manufacture things and have to import them for China? Or how can China?
We've been saying this and preaching this for a while. That's when you see the Trump administration. Okay, let me break it down from a C student's perspective. When you see the secretary, the Treasury Secretary, or you even see Trump, or you see Howard Lutnick, which is Trump's right-hand man, and they say things like, Listen, this is a national security issue. Okay? This is a national security issue. They're telling you that if we don't make the very things, the fundamental things that the world need, let alone that the United States of America need, for example, let's say we have Boeing and we have all of these military companies, right? You have all of these places. I don't want to start naming them because I don't want to start flagging stuff. But we have these companies that basically participate in the military industrial complex that also benefits from war, right? And let's say, for example, we got into another world war, a physical world war, but we don't actually make our own aluminum. We don't make our own steel. We don't have our own manufacturing plants. We are interdependent on China or the rest of the world to do so. What we do is we give up our leverage and we give up our national security because, as we've seen during the pandemic, any stop or any world issue that then takes place and we have to basically be bent over a barrel in order to get the products that we need, whether it was the ventilators or whatever else is happening, right? Which that then feeds into why a lot of people believe that China was the place that this originated and that they did it purposely, It then jeopardizes our national security and our ability to be able to protect ourselves because we don't make anything here. We don't have the capacity, the ability, the fortitude, the dedication to make anything. So that is a part of it. It is a national security issue when we are not self-reliant and then look at everybody else and say, well, you can pour into us, but we don't necessarily want to be dependent on you. And we become so dependent on the rest of the world that we give up everything. And the only thing we have as leverage is our buying power. And if we don't leverage that right now, then we will become even worse off and our national debt is exploding at the same time. So what Ray Dalio is describing is the backdrop as to why these tariffs are necessary. Now, I don't know if he's going to say that he agree or he disagree with the way that we're handling it, but he absolutely understands why we need to do this, because if we are to maintain our status as the number one world power in the world, then we have to make sure that we address these issues. You cannot have an exploding national debt where we are paying $1 to $2 trillion a year in interest alone and not paying down on the principal, owing the world, then at the same time pouring all of our resources that we do have from the taxpayers into everything else that's happening across the world in order to make a few people rich. And then at the same time, you have the political shift because people are trying to market themselves on the Democrat side and the Republican side to stay in power, even if it comes at the expense of the American taxpayers. If it comes at the expense of the country, as long as they're able to make sure that they stay in power, then that's enough. Ray Dalio is breaking this down beautifully. He's perfectly describing the issues that we have in America and the failure of previous administrations to address it. We got to deal with it. But it's going to come possibly. There's a strong possibility, unless Americans stand together, it could come at the possibility, even if we fix the issues today, and somebody like a Trump who is outside of the establishment say, you know what, we need to make the hard decisions so that we can have a prosperous future for our families and the people that come after us. And this is what's best for America. Is going to take somebody possibly to sacrifice themselves and their own party for the sake of the well-being of the country, only for somebody else to maybe usurp them if the majority of the American public don't agree with it and we don't make sure that we move in solidarity. If half of the country is divided, then it makes it problematic because then it doesn't incentivize anybody to do anything because people don't understand what we're up against. They don't understand why it's necessary for us to reestablish ourselves and to establish a hierarchy in the world order instead of just still subsidizing the rest of the world. He's breaking it down beautifully.
Be safe in terms of having capital, an American capital. Those connections are breaking down. So that's the essence of the backdrop. When we get into the tariffs, I'm sure we'll get into it.
Well,
but that's
Ray, that's a great backdrop to understand the way you're thinking about it contextually. But let's go straight to the tariffs, which is to say, how do you think, therefore, they play out? Is there, given the history that you talk about, is there the political appeal, either here in the U.S. or elsewhere, for these tariffs ultimately? And from an economic perspective, as we're all watching the
When
market
he's
today,
saying
it's
political
gotten a little
appeal,
bit better. But obviously,
when he's saying political appeal, he's saying that do the people have the stomach to actually endure through the thing that's ultimately going to benefit us long term? Is it a short term? Are you foregoing what you're going to benefit from short term by being able to see it long term, or do people have a short attention span? Do they not have the patience to actually get through this and do the thing that's in the best interest of America?
folks have lost 10%. Someone
Shout out to
said
Anton
to me
Johnson.
last week, this is like a wealth tax, except that nobody gets the money. In that, 10% of a lot of folks' wealth vanished overnight as a function of at least this discussion thus far. So what happens?
Well, mechanistically, it raises costs. It lowers revenues.
It raises costs for those that want to buy overseas or they want to buy products. Have you ever been willing to pay a little bit more for the products that you actually think benefits you the most? I'll give you a better example. There's a lot of products inside of the grocery store that if you read the back of the label, if you read the back of the box, it's not good for you, but it may be super cheap. May make you feel good at the moment. You're probably going to have a sugar crash later on in the day. Maybe genetically modified, trash in it, but it's cheap. And the way that they manufacture it and the products that they use allow for them to give it to you way cheaper, even though it got the red number 9 in it, it got all of this stuff or whatever, right? The reason that they say eating healthy is more expensive is because they've convinced you that it's better for you and it's cheaper and it's better for your pocketbook, even though it's going to cost you more in the long term with your health and your expenses and your healthcare costs and your hospital stays and the medicines that you're going to need in order to survive later on in life. So you basically front loading, right? You're saying, listen, I want to keep more of these pennies in my pocket so that I can eat the way that I want to do and feel full, even though it may not be best for me, versus actually buying the products that is homegrown. It has no GMOs in it, no pesticides in it. It's organic. It's natural. It takes longer to grow. We don't have chickens just sitting up in the coop, not being able to move, pumping them with hormones, pumping them with steroids, pumping them with the trash, and giving them just chicken feed only to send them in the machine and send them to the slaughter. We're not automating the process of keeping people fed, even at their own expenses. That's going to cost them long term. When you have all of these problems, when you got diabetes, when you have high blood pressure, you got to go to the hospital, you got to deal with all of these things, you're going to pay way more over a longer period of time when you don't do it the right way. But if you do it the right way, if you're willing to make the sacrifice, if you're willing to spend $10, $20 a month going to the gym and spending a little bit more to eat healthier and eating less of what you actually need because you need to eat to live, not live to eat, you won't have to worry about the cancer treatments. You won't have to worry about the stuff that they have inside of this trash that's going to cause you problems. That is the equivalent of what we're talking about when we are saying that it may cost you up front a little bit more, but it's going to benefit you long term and it's going to be healthier for the economies. You also help farmers. You also get to source it straight from the products from the farms that you know of, that's in your neighborhoods, that's in your community. And so you trying to get it at a discount actually is worse for you versus you just doing it the right way and actually spending the money on a thing that's best for you. That is the equivalent of what we're talking about right now. But look at it from an economical perspective only when we're talking about doing business with other countries versus doing business inside of the United States of America. And I also think that we need to do a better job marketing. We need to market to the people what's beneficial to them. One of the problems is that the worst products, they spend a whole lot of money on marketing and less money on the products. And then the people that's actually doing it right spend a little bit of money on marketing and a lot of money on the research and development of the products. And that's the disproportionate thing that Americans can't understand. A lot of companies spend a whole lot of money on marketing and a little bit of money on a product. And the best companies spend a little bit of money on marketing and a lot of money on a product. The thing that's best for you is usually at the top or the bottom of the shelf. It's never in the middle. The thing that's best for you is usually at the top, at the top, at the end, and at the bottom. It's never right there in the middle of the shelf. The people that's paying to get it in the middle of the shelf, ultimately, they just got a lot of sugar and a lot of preservatives into it so that they can move that product to you faster, and they quantity over quality.
For companies, I mean, what does it mean for a company? It means costs are going to go up, revenue is going to go down, and capital is going to be harder to come by. And so, and then we're trying to replace manufacturing. I mean, I agree with the problems.
He's saying he agreed. He agreed that we're identifying the problems. That's what he's saying.
Okay, about the fact that we don't manufacture and that there is a problem with that. But there's a structural problem of whether we can manufacture. We have a population that basically 3 million people, 1% of the population, is incredibly brilliant. I mean, they go to the best schools, they come out, they make the unicorns, inventiveness, half of which, by the way, are foreigners. And at the same time, they are making the unicorns. At the same
I need to run for office. I need to run for governor. I need to run for something. I need to run for something. I really do need to run for something. Real talk.
time, what we have is 10% of the population around them that's doing very well. The 60% of the population has below a sixth grade reading level. And it's tough to be productive. So when we agree with the problem, too much debt, Secretary Bennett and others agree we should get it down to 3%. We have to get the budget deficits down to 3% of GDP. This is not, we all agree on the problem. The question is, what do we do about it? How do you create that self-sufficiency? And so from a practical point of view, that manufacturing is very difficult under this sort of circumstances to create within the United States, yet it's needed.
So therefore, you agree with the president? You disagree with the president? I'm trying to understand what the conclusion is here. If the president is watching you right now, if Scott Bessent is watching you right now, you're telling him what? This is a good idea? You're telling him abandon this idea? What are you saying?
I agree with the problem. Okay. I am very concerned about the solution. Okay. The practicality of the solution. In other words, I think that this is going to create not only the problem, the capital markets problem that I'm talking about related to prices going up, costs going up, prices.
Yeah, I hear y'all saying you've been telling me that for years, AD. But here's the problem. I don't know what sacrifice that comes. When you start to get into politics and you start to get into that thing, it starts to really become a problem. You know what I'm saying? You start to sacrifice a lot of other. I don't, you know. When you become a public servant, you're truly going to have to make a sacrifice. When you become a public servant, you seriously are going to have to make a sacrifice. That's the problem.
Revenue going down and capital problem. But I also think that this is going to create great sand in the gears of production worldwide. At the same time, I do agree that this interdependency, this issue of productivity in the world in which we have to be competitive and productive, and we're not competitive in producing things, is a longer-term problem, not an easy one. And I do expect...
And I'm not giving up content creation. I'm never giving up the Millionaire Morning Show. I'm not giving up the Anton Daniels channel. And that's the problem.
That it is going to have political consequences. This is the nature of the cycle. It is coming also at the same time as we have a budget issue. Now, the budget issue is a comparably important issue. So as we look ahead in the months ahead, we have to get the budget deficit down to 3% of GDP. I worry about that at the same time as this is happening. These are not easy problems to solve. I'm concerned because the bigger problems exist. The debt exists. You can't get around the debt. The overspending exists. You still have that. You still have that competitiveness issue. These have repeated throughout history. We're in a period that's very much like the 1930s.
I like Ray Dalio. I think that he had a great point, but I think that he also, Ray, a lot of people that are geniuses and that are savants when it comes to finances and making money and starting businesses, um, they don't know how to communicate and break it down to a C student's perspective. But he's basically saying we agree that we have a problem. United States of America has had this problem, and we all agreed for a long time. I mean, I played last week the whole clip of Nancy Pelosi telling you that we needed to tariff China way back then, and nobody, and I mean nobody, had the balls to be able to do it. Nobody had the balls to actually go through and say, you know what, we need to deal with this problem, we need to address it. Now the problem has become a 400-pound gorilla, and you got to chop him down at the legs.